If you've watched any of my previous videos, you've probably seen my balalaika hanging in the middle of my wall of stringed instruments. Although it's probably more accurate to describe it as a sort of hybrid of a balalaika and an ukulele. I call it a balalele, or possibly a ukalaika. I've always liked the sound of the balalaika, and so I bought one about 10 years ago with the intention of learning how to play it. This particular model probably wasn't the best choice for that. It's a mass-produced instrument aimed at tourists rather than serious musicians, but it was all I could find on eBay at the time. According to the date stamp, it was made in 1966, and it's clearly seen a few knocks over the years. The biggest problem was with the tuners. Like most balalaikas, this one originally had machine heads, but by the time I bought it, one of the gears had lost a couple of its teeth, so it was completely impossible to bring one of the strings up to playing tension. I looked at trying to order a like-for-like replacement, but at that time it would have cost more than the instrument was worth to import a set of authentic balalaika tuners. So I improvised a bit and replaced them with ukulele friction pegs, which worked just fine. I can't say I did the neatest job ever of filling the screw holes, but it's on the back of the headstock where it's not really visible, so I don't mind too much. The next problem was that the action was far too high, both at the nut and the bridge, which was clearly designed for an instrument with the fretboard raised above the soundboard. This meant that all of the fretted notes were significantly out of tune, so I sanded the bridge down and cut the nut grooves a bit deeper, and now it plays in tune. Finally, I needed some strings. The balalaika traditionally has a steel A string and two identical nylon or gut E strings. I ended up using fluorocarbon ukulele strings for the two E's because they were the easiest thing to get hold of, and the balalaika has the same scale length as a tenor ukulele, so they fit just nicely. The only real problem with fluorocarbon strings is that they're quite a bit louder than nylon or gut, and they ended up overpowering the sound of the steel string. In the end, I found I didn't really get on with playing the balalaika. I couldn't really get the hang of either the left hand or the right hand techniques, and it just ended up hanging on my wall unplayed for quite a few years. But recently I had the idea to string it just like an ukulele. Of course there's only 3 strings, so I left off the 4th string, the G, and just have C, E, A. You don't actually lose as much as you might think by leaving off the 4th string. Let's look at chords. Here are most of the common major and minor chord shapes on the ukulele. These can be played as first position open chords or as movable chord shapes. So I've not included B flat, for example, even though it's a common ukulele chord, because it's just the A shape with a bar on the first fret. I've put stars underneath the strings to show all of the duplicated notes in the chord shapes. These notes are completely identical in standard reentrant tuning. Notice how almost every chord shape has a duplicated note on the G string. So the G major has a G on the 2nd and 4th strings, the D minor has an A on the 1st and 4th strings, and so on. If we take away the 4th string, none of these chords change at all. The only exceptions are C major and F minor. Now F minor isn't a problem, because the E minor shape has all 3 strings fretted, so we can just move it up a fret to give us a new F minor chord. C major is a bit trickier, and we'll get to that in a moment. To give you an idea of what the balalele sounds like strumming chords, here's an arrangement of the English folk song Erin's Lovely Home with balalele chords and a keyboard melody. Going back to the C major chord, there are a few options for what to do about it. One possibility is to play the A major chord shape with a bar on the 3rd fret. It's a slightly awkward chord shape if you're otherwise playing open first position chords, but it's certainly doable. Another option is to borrow a common balalaika technique and just leave out any notes in the chord that aren't easy to play. Because the balalaika only has 2 pitches available on open strings, it's quite common to just play 2 notes from a triad and call it a chord. We can use this technique here, leaving out the G, and it actually doesn't sound too bad. You probably don't want to use this as the tonic chord in a piece in C major, but for most other uses it's fine, particularly if you're playing with other musicians who can fill in the missing G on their instruments. Ironically, the C major chord is actually one of relatively few that are played as a full triad on the balalaika, and yet here it's pretty much the only one that isn't. Chords with more than 3 notes, such as dominant 7ths, are trickier. Obviously with only 3 strings you have to leave out one of the 4 notes. There's a number of ways to handle this. Often the best note to leave out is actually the root, particularly if you're playing with a bassist who's probably playing that note for you anyway. So that's chords. What about fingerpicking? Well, obviously you can't play complex campanella arrangements that make heavy use of the fourth string, but for simpler pieces such as folk tunes we often don't make that much use of the fourth string anyway, and so those pieces translate very nicely to the balalele. Here's a version of the Scottish folk tune An Eriskey Love Lilt. So what's the point of all this? Am I suggesting that everyone should go out and buy a balalaika and string it as an ukulele? Well, no, it's just something that I did because it was fun, and I've got a lot of enjoyment out of my balalaika ukulele hybrid. And I hope you enjoyed this video too. Thanks for watching.